The North Platte River was a silver snake in the moonlight, and it was about to swallow her whole. Ice clung to the banks, slick and treacherous. Lillian Oakwood scrambled along, her breath tearing out of her in ragged white clouds. Behind her, she could hear them. The thunder of hooves, the crack of a rifle. They were hunting her, and all for a cast iron skillet. She clutched it to her chest, the familiar weight both a comfort and an anchor. It was heavy, so heavy. But inside, wrapped in an old oilcloth, was the reason for all of this. A small leather book, a ledger. Her mother's words rang in her ears. A skillet feeds you, protects you, and outlives you, Lily. Just like the truth. The truth. Lillian almost choked on a laugh. The truth was about to get her 6 feet under. The ground just vanished beneath her. One moment she was running, the next she was sliding on a sheet of black ice. Down, down, down into the river. The cold was a physical blow, a fist to the chest that stole her breath and her will. The current grabbed her skirts, a greedy hand pulling her under. For a single horrifying second, she thought about letting go, letting the skillet sink, letting the ledger wash away, letting the whole terrible burden of what she knew disappear into the black water. But then she kicked, hard. She broke the surface with a desperate, ragged gasp. The far bank looked 100 miles away. Behind her, the lanterns of her hunters bobbed closer, like angry fireflies. There was no choice. Only forward. Martha Hayes was sweeping her porch, a nightly ritual, when she saw it. A shape staggering up from the river, half drowned and covered in mud. At 60, Martha had seen enough desperation to recognize it from a mile off. She hurried down the steps as the young woman collapsed in the dirt, still clutching an old iron skillet like it was the last valuable thing on earth. Lord have mercy, Martha breathed, dragging the girl inside her general store. You're frozen solid, child. In the back room, a fire roared to life. Martha was all business, peeling off the sodden clothes, wrapping the shivering girl in a thick quilt. A cascade of copper hair tumbled down as Martha unwound the bun, framing a face that was somehow both beautiful and hard as nails. The girl's green eyes, sharp and intelligent, darted around the room, taking everything in, even as her body shook so hard her teeth rattled. I'm Martha Hayes, the older woman said, her voice surprisingly gentle. Folks round here just call me Widow Hayes. Lillian, Lillian Oakwood, the girl managed to chatter. Her fingers, white-knuckled, were still locked around the handle of that skillet. Thank you for your kindness. Martha's eyes fell to the strange possession. Must be some special piece of cookware, risking a drowning for it. A ghost of a smile touched Lillian's lips. It was my mother's. And yes, very special. The widow didn't push. 20 years of running the only store in Copper Hollow had taught her that some questions you ask and some you just pour whiskey for. She poured the whiskey, pushing a small glass into Lillian's trembling hands. Drink this, she said, then we'll talk. But as she turned away, Martha's eyes narrowed. She knew that skillet, or one just like it, from a long, long time ago. By morning, Lillian had thawed out enough to tell a piece of her story. She kept it vague. She'd been working for a man, an important man named Ezekiel Rohr. There was a disagreement. She'd had to leave in a hurry. At the name, Martha's hands stopped their work of restocking shelves. Ezekiel Rohr, she said, her voice flat. This territory's getting too small for men like him. Lillian looked up, cautious. You know of him? Everyone this side of the Medicine Bow knows Rohr and his land association, Martha scoffed. Been squeezing out the little ranchers for years. Says he's bringing civilization, but it's just greed wearing a fancy suit from back east. Lillian's hand resting on the skillet tightened. He's more dangerous than people realize. Martha shot her a look that could curdle milk. Girl, I've buried 2 husbands and raised 3 boys in this place. I know danger when it walks through my door half drowned. She moved to the window, peering through the dusty curtains. And speaking of danger, a few of Rohr's men rode into town an hour ago. Been knocking on doors, asking questions. Lillian's face went pale. I should go. I've put you in danger. And go where? Martha snorted. It's 15 miles of open country to the next settlement. You look like you drop after 5. She shook her head. You stay put. This back room has kept secrets before. Lillian crept to the window. She watched Roar's men move down the town's single dusty street. It wasn't much of a town. A church, a saloon, a few stores, a trap. Then she saw him, a lone rider approaching from the east. Even from a distance, he was different. He sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, with a touch of silver at his temples. As he passed, people nodded. Not a friendly nod, but a nod of respect, deference. He didn't seem to notice. "Who is that?" Lillian breathed. Martha joined her at the window. "That's Jesse Holloway, owns the Independence Ranch, north of town." A strange look crossed her face. "He's the only man around here Roar hasn't been able to bully or buy." "Is he a friend of yours?" "Holloway isn't much for friends," Martha replied. "Used to be a federal judge. Can you believe that? A man who carries law books instead of a pistol." She gave Lillian a long, appraising look. "Though rumor has it he knows how to use both." A judge. Hope, sharp and sudden, pierced through Lillian's fear. "Was a judge," Martha corrected, as if reading her mind. "Gave it all up years ago, keeps to himself. Only comes to town for supplies." She hesitated, then added, her voice low, "Roar wants his land something fierce. Holloway controls the watershed, but he won't sell. Not for any price." Before Lillian could ask more, a commotion erupted outside. 3 of Roar's men had stopped a farmer's wagon. They were tearing it apart, shouting at the man. "We know she came this way!" one of them yelled, grabbing the farmer's shirt. "Brown-haired woman, traveling alone. Where is she?" "Ain't seen nobody," the farmer pleaded. Martha pulled Lillian back from the window. "They'll be in here next. You need to hide." She started clearing a space behind a stack of flour barrels. But as she worked, Lillian's gaze was drawn back to the street. To Judge Holloway. He'd stopped his horse. He was watching the confrontation with a cold, still intensity. He didn't intervene. He just watched. Then he dismounted, tied his horse outside the sheriff's office, and walked inside. "Will the sheriff help?" Lillian asked, her voice thin. Martha's face soured. "Sheriff Jenkins? That man couldn't find his own spine with a map and a search party. He takes his orders straight from Roar." The sound of heavy boots on the porch made them both freeze. Martha gestured frantically toward the hiding spot, but it was too late. The door swung open. Judge Holloway filled the doorway. His eyes, gray as a winter sky, swept the room and landed on Lillian. He held a worn leather-bound book under his arm. It looked as tired and weathered as the man himself. "Martha," he nodded to the widow, but his eyes never left Lillian. "I hear you've got company." Jesse Holloway had no intention of getting involved. 6 years. For 6 long years, he'd minded his own business. It was the only way to stay sane, the only way to forget. But something in the eyes of this woman, this half-drowned stranger clutching a skillet, made him break his own rule. "I'm not harboring fugitives, Jesse, if that's what you're implying," Martha said, her voice sharp and defensive. "I wasn't implying anything," Jesse replied, his voice a low rumble. "But Roar's men are 2 doors down. They'll be here in 5 minutes." Lillian stepped forward, her chin lifted. "Are you here to help me or to warn her?" The question caught him off guard. It was direct, fearless. Most people in Copper Hollow walked on eggshells around him. This woman, who looked like a strong wind could blow her over, met his gaze head-on. "That depends," he said slowly, "on what kind of trouble you're in, miss." "Oakwood," she supplied, her shoulders straightening. "Lillian Oakwood. And the trouble I'm in is the kind that concerns a judge." A shadow, brief but dark, crossed his face. "I haven't been a judge for a long time, Miss Oakwood." "But you still carry the law with you," she said, nodding to the book under his arm. He glanced down at the volume of territorial statutes. A habit, a ghost. His mouth tightened. "Old habits die hard." "They're coming, Jesse," Martha whispered from the window. "2 of them, heading right this way." This was it. Decision time. He hadn't stood for anyone's justice since he'd hung up his robes. Since Sarah. But this woman's quiet fire reminded him of things he had tried so desperately to bury. "There's a back door," he said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "My horse can carry 2. Relief washed over Lillian's face, but it was followed by a flicker of suspicion. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "No," Jesse agreed, "but I know Ezekiel Roar, and that's enough." His eyes went to the skillet she still held so tightly. Whatever you're protecting in there must be worth the trouble. Martha was already moving, pressing a worn shawl and bonnet into Lillian's hands. My daughter's things, she said, her voice thick. May she rest in peace. You'll look like family, to anyone who doesn't look too close. As Lillian quickly put on the disguise, Jesse watched Roar's men across the street. Their questioning of the blacksmith was getting rough. Time was running out. Remember, he instructed Lillian as they slipped out the back. You're my niece from Cheyenne, visiting after your father's death. Say as little as possible. Lillian nodded, her hand gripping the satchel Martha had given her for the skillet. Thank you, both of you. Martha squeezed her hand. You be careful, child. Then she turned her fierce gaze on Jesse. And you, don't you dare let anything happen to her. Jesse's face was grim. He won't lay a hand on her. They made it out of town. Jesse's reputation was a shield, parting the sea of suspicious eyes at Roar's checkpoint. Few men, even Roar's men, were stupid enough to challenge the former judge directly. Once the town was out of sight, they rode north in silence. The wind was cold, biting. How far to your ranch? Lillian finally asked. 5 miles, Jesse said. We'll be there before sundown. They crested a small rise, and Jesse pulled his horse to a halt. Down below on the trail, a family stood beside an overturned wagon. Their belongings were scattered in the dust. A man in a clean suit watched as 2 armed riders smashed open crates. What are they doing? Lillian whispered. Eviction? Jesse's voice was tight with a cold fury. The Petersons. That's the 4th family this month. They watched as the farmer pleaded with the man in the suit, waving a piece of paper. The suit just shrugged and pointed to a different document. The farmer got louder, angrier. One of the riders rested his hand on his pistol. The farmer fell silent. The Land Association claims they failed to meet the improvement requirements of the Homestead Act, Jesse explained, his voice flat. It's all legal, if the paperwork is done right. And is it? Lillian asked. Jesse's hands tightened on the reins. Depends on who's doing the accounting. She looked at him, at the law book still strapped to his saddle. You could stop this. You know the law. I tried that road once, he said, his voice hollow. It doesn't lead where you think. He spurred his horse forward, giving the heartbreaking scene a wide berth. The law only works when everyone agrees to play by the rules, Miss Oakwood. Out here, it's just words on paper until someone with enough power decides to enforce them. Then why do you still carry it? She challenged. He didn't answer for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was barely a whisper. Same reason you carry that skillet, I'd wager. Some things just become a part of you, whether they're useful or not. The Independence Ranch appeared suddenly, tucked into a hollow by a creek. It was well kept, defensible. The water rights alone were a treasure. As they rode up, 2 men came out of the barn. One was old and weathered, the other barely a man. Tom, Samuel, Jesse called out. We have a guest. The old man, Tom, eyed Lillian with open suspicion. The younger one, Samuel, just gave a shy nod. This is Lillian Oakwood, Jesse said, helping her down. She's in trouble. We're going to help her. Neither man asked a single question. It seemed a woman coming to the ranch was a bigger event than whatever trouble she was in. Get her settled in the spare room, Jesse told the old man. I'll see to the horse. Inside, the house was clean but stark. A desk in the corner was piled high with law books and maps. No pictures, no warmth. Judge doesn't bring visitors, Samuel offered, almost apologetically. Ever? Lillian clutched her satchel. How long have you worked for him? 3 years. Tom's been here since the beginning. Samuel paused. Since before. Since what? Lillian prompted. Samuel shuffled his feet. Since the judge's wife passed, 6 years ago now. Scarlet fever. Before she could ask more, Jesse came in. His presence filled the small room, sucking all the air out of it. Samuel, you and Tom ride the south boundary. I want to know if we were followed. The young man scurried out. Jesse turned to Lillian, his face unreadable. He opened a drawer in the desk. He pulled out a revolver and placed it on the table between them. Do you know how to use this? He asked. Lillian shook her head. Then learn, he said simply. Roar doesn't give up. He nodded at her satchel. And I have a feeling he wants what's in that skillet very, very badly. Lillian's hand tightened on the satchel. Her secret was all she had left. Jesse moved to a bookshelf, and with a soft click, a section of it swung inward, revealing a hidden compartment. He pulled out a folded telegram. "Before this goes any further, Miss Oakwood," he said, turning back to her, his gaze like a physical weight, "I need to know exactly what I've walked into." He fixed her with those piercing gray eyes. "Show me what's in that skillet. Show me what Ezekiel Rohr is willing to kill you for." Lillian looked at his face, searching for a hint of deception, of greed. She saw nothing but a deep, weary caution. This was a man who had been broken by the world, but not corrupted by it. "If I show you," she said, her voice low, "I'm trusting you with everything." Jessie gave a single solemn nod. "I understand the weight of that." Slowly, her fingers trembling just a little, she unwrapped the oilcloth. The little leather-bound ledger looked plain, harmless, just an accounting book. She opened it on the table. "For 3 months, I was the bookkeeper for the Wyoming Land Association," she began. "Ezekiel Rohr hired me himself. He wanted modern accounting methods." Jesse leaned in, his eyes scanning the neat columns of figures. "At first it all seemed above board," Lillian continued. "Land purchases, water rights, investments." She flipped to a page she'd marked. "But then I found these. Dummy homestead claims. Rohr pays drifters and drunks to file for free government land. As soon as the claim is approved, they sign it over to his association for a few dollars. Most of them don't even know what they're signing." Jesse's jaw tightened. "Land fraud. That's just the start." She turned more pages, her finger tracing the damning lines of ink. "Falsified water rights, forged improvement certificates, backdated deeds." Her finger stopped on one column. "And these are the payoffs. Local officials, lawmen, judges, all disguised as consultation fees." Jesse stared at the ledger, his face a grim mask. "This is meticulous. Names, dates, amounts. This is enough to build a federal case." "That was the plan," Lillian said, her voice hard. "My father was a lawyer. He taught me that justice needs evidence, not just anger." "Your father taught you well," Jesse murmured, closing the book. "But evidence is only useful if someone is willing to act on it. The U.S. Marshal in Cheyenne would act on this. I just have to get it to him." "If you survive the journey," Jesse said, his voice grim. He pushed the ledger back toward her. "How did Rohr find out?" A flush of anger crept up Lillian's neck. "I was careless. I kept notes. He found them. By the time I realized, it was too late. I copied the worst of it into this book and ran. And you got away." "Luck," she admitted. "And my mother's skillet." She patted the heavy cast iron. "It's surprisingly effective in a fight." For the first time, a flicker of something like a smile touched Jesse's lips. "I can imagine." A sharp knock on the door made them both jump. Tom, the old ranch hand, stood in the doorway, his face etched with worry. "Riders," he said, his voice a low growl. "Coming up from the south, Judge. 2 of 'em. Moving slow. Like scouts." Jesse nodded, all business again. "Keep watch. Let me know if more show up." As Tom left, Jesse turned back to Lillian, the brief moment of warmth gone. "We have decisions to make, Miss Oakwood, and we're running out of time." The scouts disappeared by nightfall, but the tension remained, thick and heavy as molasses. Jesse set a watch schedule. Over a meager dinner of beans and cornbread, he laid out the hard facts. "Rohr will know you're here by morning," he said, his voice flat. "After Copper Hollow, this ranch is the first place he'll look." Lillian pushed her food around her plate, her appetite gone. "I've put you all in danger. I should leave. Tonight." "And go where?" Jesse's voice was sharp. "Alone? In the middle of winter with Rohr's men crawling all over these hills? That's not courage, Miss Oakwood. That's a fancy way to commit suicide." "Then what do we do? Just wait for them to storm the ranch?" Jesse reached for the worn law book he always kept near, like a preacher with his Bible. "No, we use the one thing Rohr truly despises." He opened the book. "We use the law." Lillian looked at him, her doubt clear on her face. "The law hasn't stopped him because no one's used it right," Jesse insisted. He tapped a page. This is still a federal territory. Land fraud is a federal crime. I know that, she said, a hint of impatience in her voice. That's why I was trying to get to the U.S. Marshal. The Marshal is in Cheyenne. 4 days ride if you're lucky. But, he tapped the book again, there's a federal land agent coming to Copper Hollow next week for the quarterly land auction. A tiny spark of hope flickered in Lillian's eyes. So we just have to survive until then. And make sure your evidence gets into his hands, Jesse finished. He looked at her, his expression thoughtful. Before you worked for Roar, what did you do? The question surprised her. I was a teacher, she said, in a small schoolhouse near Laramie, until the Land Association bought up the land and shut it down. Her eyes hardened. They said the area needed economic development, not education. Jesse took that in, a missing piece of the puzzle clicking into place. So this is personal for you. Isn't it always? Lillian shot back. Even for judges? The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He stood up abruptly and went to the fireplace, poking at the embers. Get some rest, Miss Oakwood. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Lillian went to the spare room, but Jesse stayed by the fire long into the night, the ledger open in front of him. He saw the names of men he'd once called friends, their integrity sold for a few dollars from Roar's pocket. He saw the whole rotten web of it, strangling the territory. He closed the book. The last time he'd faced Ezekiel Roar in a courtroom, it had cost him everything. His career, his wife, his soul. Now fate had dropped a second chance right in his lap, but winning it would cost him blood. The next morning broke clear and cold. Lillian woke to the smell of coffee and the low murmur of voices. She found Jesse, Tom, and Samuel huddled over a map on the table. What is it? She asked, the tension in the room a living thing. More riders, Samuel said, his young face pale. 4 of them, up on the ridge, just watching. They're not hiding anymore, Jesse added, his voice grim. They want us to know they're there. So what's the plan? The auction is 5 days away, Jesse said, pointing at the map. We have to keep you, and that ledger, safe until then. Can't we send for the marshal? Jesse shook his head. The telegraph office in Copper Hollow is Roar's. Any rider we send out will be caught before they've gone 10 miles. So we're trapped. Not necessarily. Jesse's finger traced a winding path through the mountains on the map. There's another way, a way Roar won't be expecting. Before he could explain, Tom called from the window. Rider coming, single man, waving a white flag. They all moved to look. A lone horseman was approaching slowly, a white handkerchief tied to the barrel of his rifle. Jesse's face hardened. Clayton Roar, he muttered. Ezekiel's so-called son. So-called? Lillian asked. Hired gun, Jesse said, his voice clipped. A dangerous man who plays the part of family. Stay inside. He strapped on a holster the first time Lillian had seen him armed and walked out onto the porch. Clayton pulled his horse up a respectful distance away. He was tall and lean, with a fancy mustache that didn't quite hide the cruelty in his eyes. Judge Holloway, he called, tipping his hat. Fine morning. State your business, Clayton, Jesse said, his voice cold. Simple message from Mr. Roar. Clayton smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He wants his property back. The woman and the book she stole. In return, he'll let her ride out of the territory. No questions asked. Miss Oakwood isn't property, Jesse replied, and I don't hand my guests over to common thieves. Clayton's smile tightened. Strong words, Judge, especially from a man who walked away from his own oath. The insult hit its mark, but Jesse didn't flinch. Your boss seems to think justice is a matter of convenience. It's a common mistake. My boss, Clayton said, his voice turning hard, is losing his patience. This is your only offer. And this is my only answer, Jesse countered. Tell Roar that any man who sets foot on my land uninvited will be treated as a trespasser, and I will defend my property with force. Clayton stared at him, weighing the threat. You're outnumbered, Holloway. Wouldn't be the first time. Jesse's hand rested near his pistol. 20 years ago, I sentenced 3 men to hang. Their 12 friends decided to argue the verdict. History shows they made a poor choice. The threat hung in the cold morning air. Finally, Clayton gave a curt nod. I'll give him your answer. He turned his horse. But think about this, Judge. That woman isn't worth dying for. As Clayton rode off, Lillian stepped out onto the porch. He's right, she said quietly. I'm not worth all this. Jesse turned, his face unreadable. This isn't about you, Miss Oakwood. It's about principle. He walked past her, back into the house. And principle is the only thing a man truly owns. Later that morning, Jesse took her to the barn and put a rifle in her hands. A Winchester 73. I told you, I don't know how to shoot, Lillian protested, the weapon heavy and awkward in her hands. And I told you to learn. He adjusted her grip. That ledger of yours is no good if you're dead. For an hour, he drilled her, loading, aiming, firing. She was a quick study, precise, methodical. You handle that rifle like you handle numbers, Jesse observed, after she put 3 bullets in the center of their makeshift target. Numbers and bullets follow predictable paths, she said, lowering the gun. It's people who are unpredictable. The comment seemed to strike a chord with him. Come with me, he said. There's something you need to see. Back in his study, he unlocked his desk and pulled out a leather portfolio. He spread several old yellowed newspaper clippings on the table. 6 years ago, he began, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, I presided over a federal land fraud case. The key witness was a woman named Margaret Fellows. She was a secretary. She had evidence, just like you. Ledgers, letters, proof. Lillian read the headlines. Land fraud trial begins. Key witness found murdered. Judge Holloway resigns. The night before she was to testify, they found her in her hotel room. Her throat was cut, Jesse continued, his face like stone. The case fell apart. The defendants walked free. Ezekiel Rohr, Lillian whispered. Jesse nodded grimly. He was the main defendant. 2 weeks later, I resigned. Why? She asked. Why didn't you keep fighting? Could I? His voice was full of a bitter ancient pain. The system I'd given my life to had failed. It was a sham, a lie. He shook his head. I couldn't keep pretending. So you came here, to hide. I withdrew, he corrected. There's a difference. He met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the fire that still burned deep inside him. I have spent 6 years watching Rohr build his crooked empire. Your ledger. It's the first real chance to tear it all down. Before she could respond, Samuel burst into the room, his face flushed, waving a yellow piece of paper. Judge, a telegram from Cheyenne. Jesse took it, his eyes scanning the words. His expression shifted from grim determination to stunned disbelief. He handed the telegram to Lillian. Arriving Copper Hollow, Feb 15. Stop. Crucial evidence. Secure. Stop. William. Who's William? Lillian asked, confused. A storm of pride and worry crossed Jesse's face. My son, he said, his voice rough. He's an attorney for the Department of the Interior. He's been investigating land fraud in the territories for the last 2 years. Lillian stared at him, speechless. Your son is a government lawyer, and you never said anything? For his protection, Jesse said firmly. Few people know we're related. I wanted it that way. If Rohr knew. He didn't have to finish. The revelation was like a lightning strike. Suddenly, everything was different. Everything was possible. This ledger, Lillian breathed. It could be the final piece of his case. Our ledger, Jesse corrected her. He looked at the date on the telegram. February 15th, the day of the land auction. 4 days from now, he said, his expression turning hard as granite. We have 4 days to stay alive. By that afternoon, the noose had tightened. Tom reported 8 riders now, spread out in a loose circle around the ranch. They weren't hiding. They were a visible, constant threat. A siege. They're cutting us off, Jesse said, watching from an upstairs window, trying to wait us out. What about supplies? Lillian asked. We have a well, and enough food for a month, Samuel assured her. The judge always keeps the larder full. But Jesse knew Rohr wouldn't wait a month, not now. He knows William is coming, he said grimly, or he suspects it. How could he possibly know? Because Rohr has spies everywhere, Jesse said, his voice flat, including the telegraph office in Copper Hollow. The thought was a cold stone in the pit of Lillian's stomach. They were completely, utterly alone. As darkness fell, Jesse assigned watches, turning the quiet ranch house into a fortress. In the kitchen, as they ate another silent meal, Lillian finally asked the question that had been haunting her. Clayton, he mentioned your history with Roar. Was it just the trial, or is there something more? Jesse stopped cleaning his revolver. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he methodically reassembled the weapon, the clicks of the metal loud in the quiet room. My wife, Sarah, he began, his voice low and steady. She was the first one to figure out what Roar was doing. She was researching land for a new schoolhouse and noticed things in the county records, things that didn't add up. Lillian held her breath, sensing she was about to touch the source of his 6 years of pain. She took her concerns to the territorial governor, Jesse continued. 3 days later, she came down with scarlet fever. The doctor said he'd never seen a case move so fast. She was dead in 36 hours. The unspoken accusation hung in the air, cold and sharp as a shard of ice. You think Roar poisoned her, Lillian whispered. Jesse finally looked at her, and his eyes were full of a cold, bottomless grief. I don't think, he said. I know, but knowing and proving are two different things. He holstered his pistol. The official cause of death is scarlet fever, and Ezekiel Roar is still a respected man of business. Lillian reached across the table and placed her hand on his. I'm sorry, Jesse. It was the first time she had used his name. The simple act of kindness seemed to break through his iron shell. He turned his hand and gripped hers, his fingers strong and warm. So am I, he said softly. The moment was shattered by the crack of a rifle. Tom's voice yelled from the porch. Judge, they're coming! The attack came out of the darkness. Not a full-blown assault, but a series of quick, brutal strikes. They came for the outbuildings first, trying to set the barn on fire, trying to draw them out. Jesse, Tom, and Samuel returned fire from the windows of the house. Lillian, her hands surprisingly steady on the Winchester, laid down covering fire from an upstairs window. After a chaotic half hour, the attackers pulled back, leaving a small stable burning against the night sky. They put the fire out, but the message was clear. This was just a taste. They're testing us, Jesse said as they gathered in the kitchen, the smell of smoke clinging to their clothes. Seeing how we'll react. And burning through our resources, Samuel added grimly. That was half our winter hay. Lillian set her rifle down, her arms trembling from the adrenaline. This was real. These men would kill them all without a second thought, all for the book in her bag. We can't just wait here for them to pick us apart, she said suddenly. Jesse raised an eyebrow. What do you suggest? We take the fight to them, she said, leaning forward, her eyes bright with a fierce intelligence. Not with guns, with the law. She tapped the ledger. This book doesn't just have Roar's name in it. It names Sheriff Jenkins. It names county clerks, land agents, men in Copper Hollow. Exposing them now won't help us, Jesse argued. Yes, it will, she insisted. If we can get the word out, if people like Martha Hayes and the other ranchers knew the truth, it might not be a shield against bullets, but it could split Roar's support. Not everyone on his payroll is a killer. Some are just greedy men who thought they'd never get caught. Jesse's expression began to change. He was seeing it, her strategy. If they knew federal investigators were on their way, he said, grasping the idea, it would create chaos in his ranks. Exactly. Lillian's eyes were blazing now. Martha said people are fed up. They're scared of Roar, not loyal to him. Tom, the old ranch hand, spoke up for the first time. Judge, she's right. Half this territory is just waiting for someone to stand up to that man. A slow change came over Jesse's face. It was like watching a statue come to life. The reclusive, broken man was gone. In his place was the judge. Samuel, Jesse said, his voice sharp and decisive. Do you know the back trails to Frank Miller's ranch? The ones over the North Ridge? Samuel nodded. Like the back of my hand. Roar's men are watching the main trails, but they don't know the high country. Good. Jesse scribbled a quick note and sealed it with wax. Get this to Frank. Tell him to spread the word. Quietly. Federal man arrives on the 15th. Anyone with a grievance against the land association should be ready to speak up. What if I run into trouble? Samuel asked. He patted the pistol at his hip. I'll manage. As Samuel slipped out through a hidden door in the root cellar, Jesse turned to Lillian. That ledger, he asked. Are there copies? Lillian nodded. I made a duplicate. It's hidden in Copper Hollow. Jesse's eyebrows shot up. Where? Under a loose floorboard in Martha's storeroom, Lillian said. I put it there while my clothes were drying, just in case. For the first time since she'd met him, Jesse Holloway actually smiled. It transformed his face, chasing away the shadows. Miss Oakwood, he said, and there was real admiration in his voice. You would have made a damn fine lawyer. After Samuel left, a tense, waiting quiet fell over the ranch. Tom stood watch, leaving Jesse and Lillian alone by the fire. Tell me about your son, Lillian said softly. Jesse's face softened. William, he's stubborn, brilliant, too idealistic for his own good. A note of pride crept into his voice. Harvard Law. Could have had any job he wanted back east. Chose to come out here and fight for the little guy. He sounds like his father. Jesse shook his head. He's better. He didn't quit when things got hard. He stared into the fire. When I ran from the world, he ran toward it. Does he know about your wife? What you suspect? No, Jesse admitted. I never told him. I wanted to protect him from it. He chose to fight the same man who destroyed your family, Lillian said thoughtfully. That can't be a coincidence. Perhaps not, Jesse murmured. Perhaps he saw the truth I was trying to hide from. That you can't run from a fight. Their conversation was cut short by a frantic whisper from the doorway. It was Tom. Judge! Riders! Coming fast from the direction of town. They rushed to the windows. 3 horsemen were galloping toward the ranch, their horses churning up the moonlit dust. They weren't coming from Roar's camps. They were coming from Copper Hollow. It's Samuel, Tom exclaimed. And he's not alone. Jesse squinted into the darkness. That's Frank Miller with him, and Sheriff Jenkins. They ran outside as the riders skidded to a halt in the yard. Samuel swung down from his horse, his face wild with excitement. Judge, you're not going to believe it. Jenkins, he's turned on Roar. Sheriff Jenkins, a weaselly man who looked like he was perpetually apologizing for taking up space, nervously twisted the brim of his hat. Evening, Judge. There's been developments. Frank Miller, a big burly rancher, spat on the ground. Developments? Roar's gone and shot Clayton. His own son. Lillian gasped. What? Why? They had a disagreement, Samuel explained, breathless. Clayton wanted to wait you out. Roar wanted to attack the ranch at dawn. Clayton told him he was crazy, threatened to leave. Roar shot him, right there, in front of all his men. Jesse listened, his face a grim, unreadable mask. Is Clayton dead? No, but he's hurt bad, Frank said. But that's not the half of it. After he shot Clayton, Roar started screaming like a madman, ranting about federal investigators. He ordered his men to burn the telegraph office and arrest anyone who'd ever helped you, starting with Martha Hayes. Martha! Lillian cried out. She's safe, Samuel said quickly. Frank and his boys got her out of town before Roar's men could get to her. The whole town's a powder keg, Frank said. Half the folks are ready to fight Roar. The other half are too scared to spit. We need a leader, Judge. We need you. Jesse looked torn. If I leave the ranch, Lillian and the ledger are unprotected. Begging your pardon, Judge, Sheriff Jenkins piped up. But the ledger's already compromised. Roar knows about the duplicate. He's got his men tearing Martha's store apart piece by piece looking for it. Lillian and Jesse exchanged a horrified look. How could he possibly know? A sick, cold realization dawned on Jesse's face. He turned to the sheriff, his eyes like chips of ice. How exactly did Roar find out about the second ledger, Sheriff? Jenkins couldn't meet his gaze. I might have mentioned that Miss Oakwood left something behind. Before I decided to switch sides, you understand? In a blur of motion, Jesse drew his revolver and leveled it at the sheriff's chest. You betrayed her. No, yes, but I'm making it right. Jenkins squeaked, his hands shooting into the air. That's why I'm here. Roar is planning a full-scale attack at dawn. He's coming for all of you. He wants the woman, the book, and your head on a platter, Judge. Frank Miller stepped between them. He's telling the truth, Jesse. He's burned his bridge with Roar. He's got nowhere else to go. After a long, tense moment, Jesse slowly lowered his gun. He looked at Lillian, his mind racing. The plan had changed. Everything had changed. We can't defend the ranch against his whole force, he said. Then what do we do? She asked. We go to him, Jesse decided, his voice ringing with a newfound authority. We ride to town. Tonight. We rally every man willing to stand against him. He turned his hard gaze on Jenkins. And you, Sheriff, are going to deputize every single one of them. Jenkins swallowed hard. And if they resist? Jesse's face was carved from stone in the moonlight. Then they'll learn why judges in this territory used to carry more than just a book. As they made their hasty preparations to leave, Lillian found Jesse in his study, shoving documents into a saddlebag. We're leaving your home, she said softly. He'll burn it to the ground. Jesse paused and looked around the room at the house he had built with Sarah, the prison he had built for himself. It's just a building, he said. Buildings can be rebuilt. Justice, once you let it die, is gone forever. He looked at her, and the 6 years of grief and isolation fell away from him. I came here because I lost faith. In the law, in people, in myself. His eyes held a fire she hadn't seen before. I'm not making that mistake again. They rode for Copper Hollow, a small band of 6 against an army, a single ledger against an empire of greed. As they crested the last ridge, they saw it. Orange flames licking at the night sky. The town was burning. He's losing control, Jesse said grimly. A desperate man is a dangerous man. Stay close to me when we get to town, he told Lillian, no matter what happens. I will, she promised. Then on an impulse, she said, Jesse, if we don't make it through this, we will, he cut her off, his voice firm. He reached across, and his gloved hand covered hers for a brief moment. I didn't find my courage again just to lose it in one night. As they urged their horses down into the valley, toward the fire and the fight, Lillian felt a strange sense of calm. This was it. Whatever the cost, justice was finally coming to Wyoming. Copper Hollow was a vision from hell. Flames clawed at the night, and the smell of smoke and fear hung thick in the air. Main Street's a kill box, Frank Miller growled, pointing to Roar's men patrolling with rifles. We circle around. Through the livery. Jesse nodded. Frank, you and Tom take the north. Jenkins, Samuel, you take the south. Lillian stays with me. We meet at the church. They split up, melting into the shadows. Jesse led their horses through back alleys, the darkness punctuated by shouts and the sound of breaking glass. This isn't random, Jesse said, his voice a low whisper. It's a message. He's showing the town the price of defiance. They tied the horses behind the blacksmith's shop and moved on foot, ghosting from one dark shape to the next. They were almost to the church when a lantern beam swung around and pinned them against a wall. Well, well, look what the cat dragged in, a harsh voice sneered. 2 of Roar's men stepped out of the darkness, their guns already drawn. Judge Holloway, and the little bookkeeper who started all this. Lower your weapons, Jesse commanded, his voice ringing with an authority that had been dormant for 6 years. You're accomplices to federal crimes. The men laughed. Federal crimes? Roar owns this county. He is the law. Not anymore, Jesse said, his hands held carefully away from his body. A U.S. Marshal and a government attorney arrive tomorrow. Your boss is going to be arrested for fraud, intimidation, and murder, and you're going to hang right beside him. The shorter man hesitated, his eyes darting to his partner. He's bluffing. Am I? Lillian stepped forward. Did Roar tell you that the penalty for killing a federal witness is hanging? Because I'm a federal witness. She reached slowly into her coat. The men tensed, but she just pulled out the crumpled telegram from William. This came from the Department of the Interior. The investigation is already official. Jesse saw the flicker of doubt in their eyes. You have a choice, he said, pressing the advantage. Ride out of this territory tonight, or face a federal judge in the morning. The shorter man lowered his gun. I ain't hanging for Roar, he muttered. Coward, his partner spat, but he holstered his weapon too. They backed away into the darkness. That was close, Lillian breathed, her heart hammering. And informative, Jesse said. His men are losing their nerve. The rot is starting from the inside. He gestured toward the church steeple. Let's go. The church was an island of calm in the chaos. The door opened a crack, and Martha Hayes pulled them inside. Thank God, she whispered. The church was filled with townspeople, women, children, the old and the infirm. Frank and Tom were already there, handing out rifles from a hidden cache under the pulpit. 20 men are with us, scattered around town, Martha reported. Sheriff Jenkins and his 2 deputies finally found their courage, too. Where is Roar? Lillian asked. Holed up in the Land Association office, Frank said, using it as his fortress. Suddenly, the church door opened again. It was Samuel, and he was helping a man who was limping, his face bruised and bloody. It was Clayton. Judge, Clayton said, his voice weak, didn't expect to see you leading the charge. And I didn't expect to see you on this side of the fight, Jesse replied, his voice laced with suspicion. When a man shoots you for disagreeing with him, Clayton winced as Martha tended to his wound. It has a way of clarifying your loyalties. Lillian stared at him. Why should we trust you? You were his right hand. Clayton met her gaze. Because I'm tired of being the bad guy. And because I know things. Things that can help you stop him for good. What things? Jesse demanded. For starters, his real name isn't Ezekiel Roar. It's Edwin Roar. He's wanted for land fraud in 2 other territories. Clayton coughed, a racking, painful sound. And I'm not his son. I was just a hired gun he paid to act the part. Lillian's mind flashed back to the ledger. She'd seen that name, Edwin Roar, in the oldest entries. There's more, Clayton gasped. He's planning something for the auction tomorrow. Something big. He's brought in hired guns, professionals. Just then, Sheriff Jenkins burst in. Judge, they've set fire to the Mercantile. They're going building by building. He's destroying evidence, Lillian realized, and any place we could use as a stronghold. We need to move now, Jesse said. Frank, your message got out. How many men are coming from the other ranches? 30, last I heard, Frank said. Maybe more. Enough, Jesse said, a grim smile on his face. Enough to make him think twice. He turned to Jenkins. Sheriff, deputize every man in this room. For the next hour, they turned the small town into a battlefield. They sent word to the incoming ranchers, setting up a rendezvous. They fortified their positions. And through it all, Jesse moved with a purpose that inspired everyone around him. The broken, reclusive rancher was gone. The federal judge was back. As the first hint of dawn touched the sky, Jesse found Lillian staring at a map they'd drawn on the back of a hymn book. You should stay here, he said. It's the safest place. She looked up at him, her green eyes blazing. I didn't come this far to hide while other people fight my battle. It's not your battle anymore, he said. It's everyone's. All the more reason for me to be in it. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but you stay with me. A shout from outside interrupted them. Frank Miller, his face grim. Riders! A whole column of them, coming from the east. They rushed outside. In the gray morning light, a line of at least 40 horsemen was approaching. For a terrifying second, Lillian thought Roar's reinforcements had arrived. Then Frank let out a whoop of relief. It's our people, the ranchers. They rode in, a small army of farmers and homesteaders, their faces set with grim determination. And at their head rode a man who looked so much like Jesse, it took Lillian's breath away. Younger, but with the same broad shoulders, the same unyielding set to his jaw. The young man swung down from his horse. Jesse just stood there, speechless. Hello, Father, the young man said. William, Jesse breathed, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't hide. You're early. William Holloway, dressed in a lawyer's suit that was somehow still immaculate after a hard ride, gave a small smile. Your message sounded urgent. I brought friends. He gestured to the man beside him, a hard-faced man with a silver mustache and a U.S. Marshal's badge pinned to his coat. Marshal Edwards, Department of Justice, the man said, his voice like gravel. Been following your son's investigation for months. Looks like Wyoming needs a reminder about federal law. William turned to Lillian, tipping his hat. You must be Miss Oakwood. Your ledger has caused quite a stir in Washington. The pieces were all clicking into place. This wasn't just a local fight anymore. This was the federal government coming to settle a score. Jesse quickly briefed them on the situation. Roar holed up in his office, the hired guns, the town, a smoldering battlefield. He doesn't know we're here, William said. He thinks he's just fighting local ranchers. We have the element of surprise. Then let's use it, Marshal Edwards said. We surround the building. We demand his surrender. And if he doesn't surrender? Jenkins asked, his voice trembling. The marshal's eyes were cold as death. Then we remind Mr. Roar that resisting a federal officer is a capital offense. As they finalized the plan, Jesse pulled Lillian aside. William doesn't know, he said quietly, about Sarah, about what I suspect happened to her. You need to tell him, Lillian said gently. After this is over, Jesse promised, if we survive. We will, she said, echoing his own words back to him. Dawn broke over the ruins of Copper Hollow. But this was a different town than the one that had cowered in fear the night before. The streets were full of determined, armed men. Edwards organized them with military precision. Jesse and William stood at his side as they advanced on the Land Association office. Lillian watched from the church, her rifle in her hands. Jesse had insisted she stay back, to protect the ledger and her testimony. Now she watched as Marshal Edwards raised a speaking trumpet. Ezekiel Roar! The marshal's voice boomed through the silent town. This is U.S. Marshal James Edwards. You are surrounded. Surrender yourself and your men. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door of the office opened a crack. I don't recognize your authority, Roar's voice shouted back. Edwin Roar, Edwards yelled, using the real name. You are a fugitive wanted for fraud, intimidation, and obstruction of a federal investigation. Come out with your hands up. The door flew open. Roar stood on the porch, his fancy suit rumpled, his face a mask of fury. Behind him, his men looked nervous. Who told you that name? He screamed. Your identity is known in Washington, Roar, William called out, along with every crooked deal you've ever made. Roar's eyes fixed on William, then on Jesse. Holloway, he spat. Another one. Like father, like son. Both meddling fools destined to fail. It's over, Roar, Jesse said, his voice steady. Your empire of dirt ends today. Roar threw his head back and laughed, a high, unhinged sound. Ends? Nothing ends. Men like me are the future. We build things, railroads, civilization. You cling to the past. This is your final warning, the marshal yelled. Roar's hand darted inside his coat. I think not. And then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from the windows of the buildings across the street. It was an ambush. The hired guns Clayton had warned them about. Marshal Edwards went down, clutching his shoulder. William dragged Jesse behind an overturned water trough as bullets chewed the wood to splinters. From the church, Lillian watched in horror. The plan had been a trap. Roar had been one step ahead of them the whole time. We have to help them, she said, grabbing her rifle. Martha grabbed her arm. And do what? Get yourself killed. But Lillian wasn't listening. The ledger was what he wanted. Maybe, just maybe, she could use it as bait. Before she could move, the church door burst open. Two of Roar's men stormed in, followed by Roar himself, a triumphant, manic grin on his face. Ladies, he said, I believe you have something of mine. Lillian raised her rifle, but one of the gunmen had Martha, a pistol pressed to her head. I wouldn't, Roar purred. Slowly, Lillian lowered her weapon. The ledger, Roar demanded, holding out his hand. It's not here, Lillian lied, her mind racing. It's with the marshal. Roar's smile didn't falter. Search her. They found nothing. Lillian met his gaze, her own eyes defiant. You've already lost, Edwin. The evidence is in federal hands. Perhaps, Roar said, his voice chillingly calm. But killing you will be a delightful consolation prize. He gestured to his men. Bring them. I want the good judge to have a front row seat. Jesse and William were pinned down. The street was a death trap. Those aren't ranch hands, William said, firing at a second-story window. Those are professionals. Clayton warned us, Jesse gritted out, trying to staunch the marshal's bleeding. A shout came from Frank Miller's position. "Judge, they're coming out of the church! They've got the women!" Jesse's blood ran cold. He peered around the edge of the wagon. There was Roar using Lillian and Martha as human shields, moving them out into the open. "Holloway!" Roar screamed. "Show yourself, or the women die!" "Don't!" William said, grabbing his father's arm. "It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Jesse said, his voice dangerously calm as he checked his revolver. "Cover me." Before William could argue, Jesse stood up and walked out into the middle of the street, his hands raised. "I'm here, Roar," he called. "Let them go." Roar laughed. "This is between progress and the past, Judge, and you are the past." "This is about you murdering my wife," Jesse said, his voice carrying across the silent, stunned street. The gunfire stopped. Everyone froze. "What are you talking about?" Roar stammered, his composure finally cracking. "Sarah Holloway," Jesse said, taking a step forward. "My wife, the one who discovered your crimes 6 years ago. The one who died of a sudden, unnatural scarlet fever right after she reported you." Behind the wagon, William stared at his father, his face a mask of shock and dawning horror. "That's a lie," Roar shrieked. "Is it?" Jesse took another step. "Clayton didn't think so. He gave a sworn statement this morning. Told us how you bragged about it, how you poisoned her tea. It was a bluff, a wild, desperate gamble. But it hit Roar like a physical blow. "Clayton!" Roar screamed, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. He shoved his pistol harder against Lillian's head. "Stay back, or she dies." "It's over, Roar," Jesse said, his eyes locked on Lillian's. He was talking to Roar, but he was looking at her. And in that single silent glance, a plan was made. A suicidal, insane plan. Lillian drove her elbow hard into Roar's ribs. At the same instant, she dropped to the ground. For a fraction of a second, Roar was off balance. It was all the time Jesse needed. His gun was in his hand, and it fired in a single fluid motion. The bullet hit Roar in the shoulder, spinning him around. The world exploded into gunfire. William and the ranchers opened up from their positions. Martha scrambled for cover. Lillian rolled away, dirt kicking up all around her. Jesse was running, sprinting across the open ground as Roar, screaming in pain and fury, fired wildly at him. He reached Lillian and pulled her behind a water trough, just as Roar staggered back toward his office, his remaining men laying down a wall of covering fire. "We can't let him get inside," Jesse yelled. "He'll destroy the evidence." William appeared at their side. "There's another way in, a tunnel. Clayton told us." They ran, ducking through back alleys as the gunfight raged on Main Street. William led them to a hidden trap door in a woodshed behind Roar's office. "It leads to the basement," he said. It was his escape route. They dropped into the narrow, damp tunnel. Jesse went first, his revolver raised. They could hear Roar's voice up ahead, shouting frantically, "Burn it! Burn it all! Every map, every contract, every ledger. Leave nothing." They reached the end of the tunnel and peered into the basement. Roar was there, his left arm hanging useless and bloody at his side, madly shoving papers into a stove. His terrified lawyer, George Harrington, was helping him. "William, you circle around," Jesse whispered. "Lillian, stay put." Before they could argue, Jesse stepped out of the tunnel. "That's enough, Roar." Roar spun around, his eyes wide with hate. "Holloway, you just won't die." He gave a cruel, pained smile. "Did Sarah haunt your dreams, Judge? Did you hear her screaming while you hid on your ranch?" The words were poison, but Jesse's aim was steady. "Step away from the stove." Harrington threw his hands in the air, but Roar just laughed. "You won't shoot an unarmed man, Judge. Your precious principles make you weak." He turned his back on Jesse, grabbing another stack of papers. "You're right," Jesse said calmly. "I won't." From the shadows behind Roar, William stepped out, his own gun leveled. "Department of the Interior," he said, his voice cold and official. "You're under arrest." Roar froze. He turned slowly, genuine shock on his face. Then he laughed, a hollow, rattling sound. "Two Holloways, how perfect." His hand darted into his coat. But neither of you have what I want. I do, a new voice said. Lillian stepped out of the tunnel, holding her ledger high. Complete records of every bribe, every fraud, every murder. Enough to see you hang. Roar's face twisted into a mask of pure animal rage. He ripped a tiny derringer from his coat and aimed it straight at Lillian. Then you'll die with it, he screamed. 3 shots exploded in the small basement, so close together they sounded like one. Jesse's shot, William's shot, and Roar's. Roar's bullet went wild, splintering the beam next to Lillian's head. He collapsed, a look of stunned disbelief on his face, his own blood pooling on the stone floor. Impossible, he gasped, his eyes finding Jesse's. Men like me, we don't lose. You always lose, Jesse said quietly, kneeling beside him. Justice just takes its time. Roar's last breath was a whispered curse. Sarah, business, nothing personal. It was personal to me, Jesse said. But Edwin Roar was already gone. The silence in the basement was absolute. William holstered his gun, his face a storm of emotions. Mother was murdered, he said, the words a statement, not a question. And you knew. I suspected, Jesse said, his voice heavy. I could never prove it. I didn't tell you. To protect you. I spent my whole career hunting men like him, William said slowly, and I was just walking in your footsteps the whole time. Your own footsteps, Jesse corrected gently. Just on the same path. The moment was broken by the arrival of Marshal Edwards, who took one look at Roar's body and grunted. Well, looks like justice has been served. Not yet, Lillian said, gathering the unburned papers from the floor. Justice is just getting started. She fixed the terrified lawyer, Harrington, with a stare that could freeze fire. And you, Mr. Harrington, are going to tell us everything. Later, as they secured the scene, Lillian found Jesse staring up the basement stairs toward the light. It's really over, she said. He nodded, looking suddenly weary. 1 chapter, at least. What now? She asked. For you. He looked up toward the daylight, as if seeing it for the first time in 6 years. Rebuilding, he said. For the town, and maybe, for me. Will you go back to being a judge? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I spent 6 years hiding from the world, Miss Oakwood. I'm not sure the world still wants what I have to offer. Lillian's hand found his. I think you'll find it does, Judge Holloway, she said softly. I certainly do. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a new chapter began. William's voice called down from above, breaking the spell. Father, the marshal needs you. The townspeople are gathering. Jesse squeezed her hand once. Duty calls, he said. And together they walked up out of the darkness and into the light. The Land Association office, once a symbol of Roar's tyranny, became the headquarters for a new kind of law in Copper Hollow. By afternoon, Marshal Edwards had the town locked down. Roar's surviving men were in the makeshift jail, and the fires were finally out. Jesse stood on the porch, looking at the damage. The town was wounded, but it was alive. William joined him, a stack of ledgers in his arms. Harrington is singing like a canary, he reported, trying to save his own skin. He claims Roar coerced him, threatened his family. A convenient story, Jesse said, his voice flat. Speaking of which, Miss Oakwood has been incredible, William continued. Her testimony is going to be the nail in the coffin for this whole conspiracy. Jesse's gaze drifted across the street. Lillian was with Martha Hayes, helping organize relief for the families whose homes had been burned. She moved with a quiet, determined grace that drew people to her. She's a remarkable woman, Jesse agreed softly. William gave his father a knowing look. You seem to have a high professional respect for her. I do, Jesse said, not rising to the bait. William's smile faded. Father, about what Roar said, about Mother. Jesse's jaw tightened. I should have told you. I was trying to protect you from the weight of it. I wish we could have carried it together, William said. He looked out at the broken town. All this time I never knew. I didn't want you to, Jesse admitted. After the trial, after Roar walked free, I lost my faith. In everything. I couldn't bear to see you lose yours too. But you kept your law books, William pointed out. Old habits, Jesse said. More than that, William replied. It was hope. You were waiting for a reckoning. They stood in silence for a moment, the 6 years of distance between them finally closing. How did you know to come early? Jesse asked. My telegram was vague. William smiled. Martha Hayes sent her own telegram 3 days ago. She told the Department of the Interior everything. About you, about the ledger, about the danger. Jesse looked surprised. She never said a word. She's a formidable woman, William said. Wyoming seems to breed them, Jesse agreed, his eyes finding Lillian again across the street. Their conversation was cut short by Frank Miller. Judge, it's Clayton. The doctor says he's fading fast. They found him in the church, pale as the sheets he lay on. Internal bleeding, the doctor said quietly. Nothing I can do. Clayton's eyes fluttered open. Judge, he whispered. Is it over? It's over, Jesse confirmed. Roar is dead. A faint smile touched Clayton's lips. Good. He coughed, a weak rattling sound. Did he suffer? He died quickly, Jesse said. Pity, Clayton murmured. Marshal Edwards leaned in. Clayton, we need your official testimony. About Roar. About Sarah Holloway. Clayton's eyes found Jesse's. He bragged about it, he whispered, his voice gaining a flicker of strength from old anger. After you resigned, he called it his greatest victory, said he put something in her tea, a poison that mimicked the fever. William's hands clenched into fists, his face rigid. Why turn on him now? Jesse asked. After all these years? He shot me, Clayton said with a bitter smile. But more than that, when you're looking death in the eye, you start thinking about the life you've lived. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Some things are beyond that. His voice grew fainter. I never had your courage, Judge. I took the easy road. But at the very end, I chose differently. Remember that. I will, Jesse said solemnly. One more thing, Clayton whispered, his breath catching. The safe, behind Roar's portrait. There's another ledger, an older one. From his days in Colorado. The combination is his birth year, 1842. He had been more than a hired gun. He had been Roar's insurance policy, the man who knew where all the bodies were buried. And in his last moments, he had handed Jesse the key. Clayton closed his eyes and didn't open them again. They went back to the office. William worked the combination Clayton had given them. The heavy safe door swung open. Inside, beneath bundles of cash and fraudulent deeds, was another ledger. Older, its pages yellowed with age. William opened it. His face grew grim. This goes back 15 years, he said. It names everyone. Judges, senators, land officials, even the territorial governor. This will tear the territory apart, Jesse said. Good, Lillian said, her voice firm. It needs to be torn apart so we can build something better. Marshal Edwards secured the new ledger. The evidence was now overwhelming, a web of corruption that reached the highest levels of power. As the Marshal and William discussed logistics, Lillian's earlier question came back to Jesse. What now? The town was rebuilding. Justice was in motion. But his own future was a blank page. The Independence Ranch, the place he had hidden for 6 years, was gone. Stragglers from Roar's gang, in a final act of spite, had burned it to the ground. When Tom had brought the news, Jesse had felt a strange sense of release. The prison was gone. The governor has summoned you to Cheyenne, William had told him, a telegram in his hand. The corruption in the new ledger went all the way to the top. My place is here, Jesse had argued, looking at the townspeople clearing rubble. Copper Hollow will heal, Lillian had countered, but the territory needs a man of principle. It needs you. And so the decision had been made. His retreat was over. Whether he wanted it or not, Jesse Holloway was back in the world. Now, as the sun set over the wounded town, he stood with Lillian on the porch of Martha's store, a cup of coffee in his hand. A week ago, Lillian said, I was running for my life with nothing but a skillet. Now, she trailed off, looking at the community working together. And I was a ghost, hiding from my past, Jesse added. We were both wrong, she said. I thought one person couldn't make a difference. You thought the system was broken beyond repair. Perhaps the truth is somewhere in the middle, Jesse mused. He looked at her, at the quiet strength that had faced down a tyrant. The Department of the Interior has offered you a position, I hear, in Washington. They have, she confirmed. A chance to write new laws to prevent other men like Rohr from ever taking power. It's a great opportunity, Jesse said, his voice carefully neutral. It is, she agreed. But I find myself reluctant to leave Wyoming. There's important work to be done here, too. She met his gaze, her green eyes clear and direct. The air between them crackled. This was the moment, the future. I expect I'll be in Cheyenne for some time, Jesse said slowly. The investigation, the reforms, it will take months. A significant commitment. It is. He took a breath. 6 years of solitude had made him forget how to do this. Unofficially, I would welcome your company on the journey and beyond. Lillian's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Are you offering me a position, Judge Holloway? I'm asking you to consider a future, he said, his voice rough with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. With me. Jesse Holloway, she said softly. I accepted that future in my heart the moment you rode out of Copper Hollow with me. The journey to Cheyenne was the start of a new life. They rode into the territorial capital not as a fugitive and a recluse, but as heroes. The governor, a man named Brooks, whose initials they'd found in Rohr's ledgers, greeted them with a politician's slick smile and a private warning for Jesse. Balance justice with stability, the governor had urged, offering Jesse a seat on the Supreme Court in exchange for his discretion, in exchange for bearing the evidence that implicated men like him. This territory has no future without justice, Jesse had told him, sealing his fate. The legislative hearing was a storm. Lillian, calm and precise, laid out the years of financial fraud. William presented the testimony of Clayton and Harrington, and Jesse, the ghost of Wyoming justice, stood before them all and confirmed the rot that went to the very top. By the end of the day, the governor had resigned and fled the territory. The council president was under arrest. The empire of dirt had crumbled into dust. In the weeks that followed, a new Wyoming began to rise from the ashes. Federal prosecutors arrived, and indictments rained down like a summer storm. William stayed on, leading the commission to reform the territory's land laws. And Jesse, though he refused any official title, became the quiet, unshakable voice of integrity that guided them all. He bought a new piece of land near Laramie, a place for a fresh start. And one spring afternoon, as they walked through a park in Cheyenne, he asked Lillian to share it with him. Their wedding was a small affair, held on the porch of their new ranch house. William was there, and Martha Hayes, her eyes shining with pride. As twilight fell, Jesse raised a glass. To new beginnings, he said, his eyes finding Lillian's. Later, as they stood alone under the vast Wyoming sky, the sound of Lillian's iron skillet being placed on the stove drifted out from the house. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was home. Your mother was right, Jesse said, pulling her close. About the skillet, it outlasts everything. And about the truth, Lillian added softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. It's the only legacy that matters. The ranch was a beacon of hope, a testament to what could be built on a foundation of courage and principle. The journey had been long and brutal, but it had transformed them, and the territory they now called home. In Jesse's study, framed on the wall, a newspaper headline hung beside his law books. Iron Skillet and Western Law Triumph Over Corruption. If you enjoyed this story of justice on the frontier, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button for more tales of when the law finally came to the lawless West.